ideas of the types of activities our architects should consider when designing a renovated Caryl and a new replacement building. It is not to consider design options, because there are none at this point. Activities will determine design criteria. We anticipate a 45-minute presentation and a hard stop of this meeting at 8:30 p.m. First, let me introduce the building committee members. Dave Billings is an owner's project manager with Hill International, and he served on a previous Caryl study committee. Luciana Berti is an architect. She is a deputy director of capital planning and environmental affairs at Massport. Sam Coles is with Liggett McCall Properties, responsible for building development and construction. Barry Goldman is chair of the Dover Capital Budget Committee and is involved in building financing options by his profession. Terry Sobolewski has a professional background in energy and sustainable energy options solutions for buildings and communities. He's president of National Grid in Rhode Island. Ruth Townsend is involved in many Dover community groups and is assisting us with communications. I co-chaired the Dover Middle and High School Building and Campus Project many years ago. I'm in the final stages of chairing a Minuteman Vocational School $145 million building project and now chairing their athletic complex development and construction. Since its formation, the building committee has been involved with the procurement of our owner's project manager, OPM. And with the selectman's appointment, Colliers International has joined our team, led by Ken Guyette, and with us tonight, Phil Palumbo. The function of the OPM is basically to manage our project representing the owner, manage it, keep it on time and on budget, and keep us on task. The OPM led us through the procurement process of obtaining a design firm, architect. The OPM and Building Committee recommended to the Selectmen Fenwick McCready Architecture. FMA is our architect. That firm is led by Deborah Fenwick, John Richardson, and Melissa Valancourt. FMA is responsible to lead us through the feasibility study. This is the process we are in now. We are defining the purpose and activities to be in the building. With this information, FMA will create schematic renderings of building options to consider. The committee will select a renovation option and a new building option. The total cost to construct and provide soft cost expenses will be determined and assigned to each option. It is anticipated that these options will be brought to a 2021 spring town meeting for you, the voters, to make a final selection for construction design and the final. This process, there will be community education and involvement, very similar to this evening. For the feasibility stage, we have met and/or are meeting with the COA board and director, Park and Recreation board and director, PTO and Dover Mothers representatives, sports groups, lacrosse, soccer, and baseball, Chris Dwellier, our town administrator, Max Olmstead from the Dover Church, Erin McCann of Erin's Dance, and the CDC. And now this evening, all of you. The same question has been posed to all. What activities should we consider for a renovated new community center? Keeping in mind that our project cap is $13 million, which computes to a $9.5 million construction budget. Based on last year's Caryl Community Center Committee's work, as reported in the 2019 town meeting, and also communicated in their summary of findings and frequently asked questions document dated to August 2019, and that can be found on the website, and I urge you all to review it. This is what our committee is planning. A community center that will house the COA and Park and Recreation offices and related services that meet their core responsibilities. 4 to 7 shared, flexible spaces of varying size to support activities for our community. For example, one room may support 5 or more different activities during the course of a day and evening. General purpose spaces, such as a common entry, community gathering, social area, a shared conference room, and yet to be defined kitchen, storage, and the like. Anything beyond what I have mentioned that is larger in scope will have to be vetted by us, and a determination will be made if there is sufficient community support to go beyond what we told the October 2019 special town meeting. And then it would have to meet a 2/3 town meeting vote for additional spending, i.e., what is the town really willing to pay? Are they willing to pay for it? Finally, our work is built upon 20 years of study of previous committees, and we are indebted to their comprehensive information. We are indebted to past participants for their efforts in the town's behalf. The work we are embarking on is a continuation of last year's committee. We have validated and moved forward their findings, guardrails into our process. We're going to hold all comments and questions until the end of the presentation. And now let me introduce Phil Palumbo of Colliers International.
Thank you, Ford. Like Ford mentioned, my name is Phil Palumbo, project manager with Colliers. We're Dover's owner's project manager. So first, I want to thank you all for attending tonight. We know we're cutting into family time, so we're going to be as efficient as possible as we can with your time. But this is a big step for the design process of this project, because ultimately we want to do the best we can to make sure this community center building and site aligns with the community's desires and needs. So for an overview of tonight's presentation, I'll provide the update on project schedule and project budget. I'll then hand it over to the architects on the project. They'll get into the project's criteria for success, get into their current programming understanding, and then get into some detail on some activity spaces that they've learned through their user interviews. And then we're going to open it up to you all so we can hear feedback from you all, like Ford mentioned, as it relates to spaces you want to see in the building and on the site, and different activities you would like to be able to perform at the community center. Yeah. Next slide, John. Sorry. So overview of the project schedule. So it's essentially a two-phase design project, if you will. We're currently in the initial, what's called feasibility study phase. Come January, we're going to move into the second design phase, which is called schematic design. And the idea is, like Ford mentioned, that's going to lead into Springtown meeting of next year, where the Dover taxpayers are going to be able to vote on what direction they want the project to go. Next slide, John. So to kind of further detail what's going to happen during the design process, in feasibility study, the phase we're currently in, that's when the design team kind of hits the ground running with collecting all the info they can on the existing building, the existing site, conducting user interviews of the folks that use the building on a daily basis so they can kind of understand space requirements, space sizes, adjacencies, etc. And then from there, they put pencil to paper and start producing design schemes. So through this initial feasibility study phase, the design team will produce multiple new construction schemes, multiple renovation schemes, potentially addition renovation schemes. We'll see where it goes. But ultimately, the idea is when we move into schematic design, the second phase, which will start in January, the goal is we move into that phase with one chosen new construction scheme and one chosen renovation scheme to further advance, further detail during schematic design, and then towards the tail end of schematic design, produce construction estimates for those two schemes. And it's that further updated information that will be presented to the Dover taxpayers for next year's Springtown meeting. In terms of project budget, again, like Ford mentioned, we're working with a total project budget of $13 million. Within that total project budget, the design or construction budget, if you will, is the $9.5 million. So ideally, we want to produce a building and site that the community and Dover taxpayers feel perfectly aligns with every want and desire the folks have. But ultimately, we got to keep in check in terms of that $9.5 million design budget we're working with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Deborah Fennick, principal of Fennick McCready Architects, and she'll get into her space programming update. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Can you all hear me? Oh, there, I see it. Okay, so it's truly a pleasure to be here this evening, and I'm looking forward to learning more about your priorities for the Dover Community Center. This is a really important milestone for us all. As you all know, the project was originally built as a school. I mean, not the project, but the Caryl was built as a school, purpose-built, and has been for quite a while now functioning as a community center. This project's really a wonderful opportunity to transform this site into and this structure into a very welcoming, lively community center that reflects the values of the community and houses a multitude of activities in very flexible and useful space. To this evening, we're going to be spending most of our time talking about the activities and programs for the interior, but there are promising opportunities for activating the site also for community uses. So towards the end, we're going to get to that. And what we're looking at right now is a picture of the existing school or the existing community center on the site. Next slide, please. So we visited the building and we will be doing, as a part of this phase of our work, doing an existing conditions report. But we did hear a lot about the building in the many interviews and meetings that we've had. Some of the things that have risen to the surface are something that everyone talked about was how the heating doesn't work. It's too hot, even in the winter, and the building is sort of many parts of the building are almost unusable through much of the year. And of course, there's very little air conditioning also. So this project will be rectifying those issues. The building needs better Wi-Fi and other infrastructure. There's noise like rooms next to a quiet room next to an active room makes some of those spaces unusable. The kitchen is not usable. A real key point here is that the building is not accessible. And there are many points of entry into the building. So it's really a real important goal for this project is to develop a drop-off entrance and consolidated area for access control for the building. And finally, whether the project ends up as a renovation or new construction, the project is going to meet current codes. Next slide. So now, as Phil mentioned, we're going to be talking about the criteria for success. And this is the guiding principles that will create a framework all the way through the project. We will continue to return to these sort of principles and this criteria to measure where we are in the project. And will also be used really importantly during the alternatives phase where we use this criteria to judge the alternatives. Next slide, please. So we have 5 categories of criteria. The first is general. The first, I'm going to highlight some of the criteria here, but as Phil mentioned, the project has to meet the construction budget of $9.5 million. And as I mentioned before, full access and aspiring to universal access, which is a really important component. So there's accommodation for any kind of access and also other features in the building that accommodate this multi-generational population that will be using the building. The next group project will function. And so one of the key ones on this one is that we want to maximize flexible use space. That's really a key to accommodating a broad range of activities in a smart way. And other key criteria is that the day the project opens, the new center will meet current needs, but it will also be an enduring building and design that can serve the community for the next 20 years. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Oops. So this one. Oh, the next category is criteria for how the center is experienced by those who are using the building. It's a welcoming place. It has a welcoming atmosphere. It encourages residents to meet, to be active, to learn, to play in a healthy environment. The community criteria, reflects the values of the community. It's the building and site. Must be architecturally harmonious with the local built environment. And it's really important, again, that it reflects the community that it's serving, the Dover community. That it's important that it's a focal point of community life, of town life, and it serves again a broad range of community members. And finally, sustainability, where the building will strive to be as energy efficient as possible, be built of durable materials that are easy to maintain. And so the building serves, is like new as long as possible. It's a good neighbor in terms of the way we light the building, and that it provides resiliency for the community and infrastructure that supports the community in a power outage or another kind of weather event. And so at this point, John is going to talk about what we have learned about the Caryl programming. Next slide, please.
Yeah, if I can get the next slide. Thank you all. I'm John Richardson, project architect, working with Deborah, for Deborah, and for all of you on this project. The next portion is going to be just a very quick summary of our understanding of the programming. Like has been mentioned before, we've done interviews, we've reviewed the previous studies, and this is just a summary of that. I think Ford went through most of the list at the beginning, but this is a list of all the stakeholders who we've interviewed and or are going to interview, from obviously Council on Aging and Parks and Recreation, to theater groups like Dover Foundation and Open Fields. We've talked to several of the youth sports leagues. We talked to the Chickering PTO, Chickering Elementary PTO, as well as the Dover's Mother Association, the town administrator. Ford and Ruth spoke with the Dover Library, and we will be speaking to CDC and Aaron Stantz shortly. So in addition to those interviews, we also were provided with detailed schedules from 2018 for all the programs that Parks and Rec scheduled as the schedulers of the building, as well as the programs from Council on Aging. And we went through these master schedules that listed every single activity and what day it met, what room it met, for how long it met, with comments. And we've synthesized that, and we've really looked to categorize the specific activities into groups of spatial need or space categories. All the while, as Deborah mentioned, we're looking for synergies and flexibility so that we can get multiple uses out of the same space. And the categories we've come up with are a fitness category for active activities, flexible activity spaces, could be meeting rooms and or activity spaces. Miscellaneous community spaces is kind of a grab bag of spaces. Deborah will get into more of the detail in a little bit on these sections. And then Parks and Recreation and Council on Aging, we are obviously going to have enough spaces for their core functions, be it their offices, storage, etc. And then we need some storage in the building just to make it function. So, and just to give you a sense of the range of activities that were in those documents that we talked about, that we reviewed the schedules are, this is what's up here. I won't go through that in all detail, but you can see there's a range of recreational group games that were often in the gym, fitness activities that may have happened in the gym or the library, preschool activity. There was seniors drop into the lounge in the Council of Aging. And some of these are desired too, so support for lifelong learning activities, more support for crafts and hobbies. We heard about potential for small performance spaces, as well as better support for theatrical rehearsals. Music practice, informal social gathering. There is currently a teen game room, but maybe it's more of a multi-generational game room. We heard about a desire for gaming capacity from the Council of Aging, as well as possibly cooking classes and maybe a space for tutoring. These are just some of the things we looked at, and we've been going through them and trying to find what synergies we can in terms of their requirements, spatial requirements. What's up here is a more graphic summary of basically the same information. As I said, we reviewed those schedules, and this diagram is showing dots for activities. The deeper color are more regular activities, 3 times a week or more. As the colors get lighter, it's maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. And then I should further say the Council on Aging dominated spaces like the Blue Room and the Council on Aging offices are shown in orange hues. Parks and Rec spaces like their offices are in purple. They schedule the whole building. You can see that the density of spaces or the density of activities is concentrated in just a few spaces like the gymnasium, the cafeteria, and the library or Caryl room. And that's partially because those were the best spaces, and that's also partially because a lot of the other rest of the building is either used for storage and or leased space. So we've tried to process that in understanding as we take what is currently a 40,000 square foot building and look to build something that might be closer to 18,000 square feet if it was new. And in order to do that, as we've mentioned, we need to look at flexibility of spaces as well as coordinating schedule. Then now in this next part, we're going to start to get into the activity spaces themselves. Before Deborah walks you through those specific spaces, this is just a kind of a visual recap of the major spaces in the Caryl Center. I know a lot of you, probably no one has been into the center in recent months due to COVID, so this is to jog all our memories and have that for a reference point too for people who watch this presentation later. You can see the most used spaces here from those other diagrams, like the cafeteria, the gym, and the library are fairly open spaces with a flexibility of layout. And some of the other spaces like the Blue Room or the Teen Room have more, and like COA offices have more built furniture, which kind of constrains their type of use. So these are some of the considerations that we'll have as we look towards future spaces, which Deborah is now going to discuss in more detail.
Oh, all right, thanks, John. This is the final section of our presentation where we take the information that we've gathered, the recent interviews, which included the activities the community has enjoyed at the Caryl and those envisioned, and synthesize them into an initial approach to space programming. So the point to be made, this is, again, an initial approach. We imagine as we synthesize the comments we get tonight and in the next several days and final interviews that we will be refining this information and making it more precise. It'll shift a little bit. Some spaces might go away, some may get doubled. So that is, but this gives us something to talk about tonight in order to sort of be able to start to envision the way the community center will be functioning and the kinds of spaces that will be provided. And so these categories are the same categories that John talked about: fitness, flexible activities, miscellaneous community functions, parks and rec, and council on aging. And here we're showing spaces, most of these flexible spaces that sort of reflect potential future rooms that will be in the space. So the fitness, for the fitness category, we have the fitness room and the recreational games room, which is house functions that are housed currently in the gym. Flexible activities, we're showing 2 flexible spaces that would be for meetings, for crafts, for presentations, and we are showing them with the potential that they get combined into a single larger space to give further flexibility for that area, and as well as the community space. So in terms of miscellaneous, we have the kitchen, the cafe, the mother-child drop-in area, not drop-in, but a drop-in area that accommodates children playing and the parents socializing, and kitchen, a sound-controlled room, and storage to supplement those functions. I think are really important point to make is that storage, to make the flexible spaces work, we need to provide storage for them. So that will be very much a part of the refinements that we bring to this. Especially the multi-use spaces will require the setting up of tables, storing of tables and chairs, perhaps pulling out exercise mats, whatever. So storage is going to be real key. Efficient storage is going to be key to making those multi-use spaces work. Parks and Recreation all have offices that will be accommodated in the building, and a game room for and Council on Aging has their offices. They have a lounge and also personal care area and storage that supports it. So now we're going to go into more detail in all of these space types to give you an idea of how we will be approaching the programming of them. So if we can go to the next slide. There's a couple of things I wanted to make. So a number of these spaces, the fitness spaces, the flex activity spaces, and a couple of the other spaces below that, which are actually highlighted in a teal color, are activity spaces. They're flex spaces. In the study that was done about a year ago, the 2012 study, that anticipated 5 to 7 activity spaces, multi-use use spaces. Accommodating the program as we were seeing it comes in about that order of magnitude. So it feels like this is heading in the right direction. I think we're ready for the next slide.
Okay.
I don't want to talk too much about that one because there's more detail in this one. So to describe these the fitness spaces, the first one, fitness space, which, as John was saying, would accommodate activities like dance, meditation, yoga, taekwondo, and other spaces. And then the recreational games would accommodate active sports, noisy sports, ball games, pickleball, basketball, and things like that. So the characteristics of these two spaces will be very different, although they're both for active uses. The fitness space will, because it's got dance and taekwondo, and it will be springier than the gym space. It will be also likely a quieter space, and the lighting, the natural lighting, would be very different than in a active sports space, which would probably be a lot louder than the fitness spaces, need isolation from other rooms, and just a different kind of control of natural and artificial light. So the activity spaces, again, the two flex spaces that can add up to a larger space and community room. So the activity spaces would include crafts, again, meetings, and various functions like that. And we could go through a list of those things. And the two actually activity spaces would be developed slightly differently, where the activity room would want to have a lot of cabinetry, probably a water source for a sink, for expanding the functions that can happen in there. The meeting room would be more intensely accommodate infrastructure for AV and activities that or technology that would support meetings, whereas the community gathering space is a large space. Ideally, it's near the entrance and it's near the kitchen. It might be able to accommodate a small stage. It would have to have a lot of the right kind of storage, so that tables can be moved out and brought back in. I forgot to mention that the large space would also be able to accommodate congregate dining and other functions that would benefit from the proximity to the kitchen. And that would be a high ceiling space. Okay. In terms of the miscellaneous spaces, the cafe would make the most sense near the entry as a casual place to drop in and to see and be seen. And as well as the toddler space could make sense being, again, near the lobby. And the idea of that space is that it is a place where kids can play, and parents, mothers, and fathers can be with their children, but be able to be social, and at the same time keep an eye on their children. This would support other spaces, and definitely the community space, or one of the large flexible spaces, and might make sense that it has proximity to the cafe. And then the sound controlled room is a room that can either be very quiet or it could be very loud, and the sound is isolated within the space, so it could accommodate tutoring and small group meetings, and it could also accommodate music rehearsals, lessons, and other noisy functions that won't disturb other spaces.
And I apologize for that image. Somehow it got compressed into being unrecognizable, but that's a rehearsal space that we have a picture of.
Yeah. Okay, and Council on Aging and Parks and Recreation are on this slide. And again, the COA offices, there's offices, there is a personal care space, which would be an independent space, independent room. Community services, many functions happen in the COA offices, and there would be a lounge that accommodates the COA population. For Parks and Rec, again, office space for managing, that's where all the programs in the building are managed, and a conference room that would be a part of the office space, and a game room, which could be actually a space that's shared by a couple of different groups. And so the game room, the idea is that it would be a place where seniors could come and play cards or pool or other games, and during the day. And then right after school, the room would transform into a place where tweens could drop in and do their version of games and pool and activities that would be attractive to that age group.
All right.
And I think our final slide are some thoughts about activities that could be accommodated on the site. The first one is a patio. We're saying a patio space. Maybe there are a couple of those, which allow for the expansion of indoor programs outside. It could accommodate shaded or sunny areas. There's a wonderful stand of pines, which define the backyard I call it the backyard, very beautifully. And so there could be areas in the shade that are provided for informal gatherings, or sunny seating, because that is also the south side of the building. And could support informal events, as well as programmed events, as well as informal, just drop-in activities. The gardening, a garden would be something that could be shared could be a space where a child and their grandparent comes to do an activity together, planting. A walking path is an option that would circumvent the property, which could be an exercise course also. And then play space. A lot of people talked about ball court and expanding sort of the function of that space, which could be for, again, scheduled events or reserved events, as well as casual events. A flat grass area that could be used for soccer drills or other and some unprogrammed activities. And there was discussion of wanting to have places on the site that kids could come after school on their bikes and have, and meet at the community center and find activities that they could do in the on the grounds, as well as, and pickleball, that goes with that ball court, something that could be accommodated in that location. And so, next slide. So
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Sure.
This is going to be really quick, just because we had two chats, and I know we can customarily answer them directly, but I'd rather do it this way. One question from Janet Bowser is why is the construction cost limited at 9.5? Let me make a clarification, then Phil might want to jump into this. We told the town meeting, it was not voted on, but we told the town meeting that the maximum we would go to, and it was for an 18,000 square foot building, that the cap would be $13 million. So that wasn't voted to, but my feeling is when we give our word to something, we need to live by that word. So what we might want to just answer quickly, Phil, what is the relationship between the 13 and the 9.5? And you're on mute, so you're going to have to be unmuted by Kate.
All right, thanks, Ford. So the relationship between total project budget and construction costs is you're going to have your hard costs, which is the construction costs, and then everything else is soft costs. So the cost to furnish the building, the cost to provide technology to the building, meaning computers, et cetera, the cost to have a contingency budget to account for unforeseen conditions that happen during construction or issues that pop up during construction that weren't anticipated. So change order related stuff. Other soft cost items are design team fees, OPM fees, material testing fees. So everything else that comes with designing and building this type of project that is outbound of actually constructing it, that's a soft cost. So generally speaking, a total project budget, you're looking at around 75% of it is construction costs, and the remaining is your soft costs. So when you look at where numbers are coming in these days with this type of publicly funded project, square foot costs, the $9.5 million construction budget makes sense.
Thank you. The other question came in from Lulu Fan, and she said, what about a pool? As I explained when I gave my introduction, anything that goes over and above, number one, the cost, or what we told the town meeting, such as a pool, I could say such as a large gym, or something that they're going to have to be a large contingent of citizens that want, that they are willing to pay for, and you're going to need a 2/3 vote at a special town meeting in a separate article. So it's just over and above what we're talking about. If you can get 2/3 of the citizens at a town meeting to show up to vote for that kind of expenditure, then it probably could be added, but that would be questionable. Finally, Caryl Lisbon asked, and again, I think it was brought up within our slide presentation. Yeah, we are thinking about an emergency facility within this building, such as it used to be in the townhouse, to house people. So that's very much part of our thinking, and that's what we said in the survey. If we could now go, in the presentation, if we could go to the survey so we can allow more time for everybody to ask questions.
Yes, Ford, I just need to clarify that we've definitely talked about one of the criteria being the building functioning as a facility in the case of weather events, but specifically an emergency shelter. I think we've mentioned this at building committee level. That is a higher trigger and would require a complete structural redoing of the building, among other things, and would entail significant costs. So that to rise to that level would kind of be among the category of some of these other items that you mentioned, that if there is a town demand to rise to that level, we could consider it, but it needs to be a strong and clear support for that.
Okay, let's go to the survey, please.
Yeah.
So this is the interactive section of our of our evening, where we'll get instant feedback from the survey so that you can see the choices that your fellow citizens have made. And then after that, we can finish addressing comments and questions.
Right. And so we have 3 questions. I'm going to open, we've started the poll now. I'll just explain it while you can fill it out. This one you can answer as many of the questions as is appropriate, but we'd just like to know, of those of who are attending, what programs did you use at the Caryl before COVID? What was the history of your use? Whether it was social activities for the Council of Aging, or maybe exercise activities, Parks and Rec, in terms of adult exercise options, or they also had a lot of after-school activities. Did you use it for youth sports? We know that the 2 theatrical groups used it for rehearsal. Were you one of those people? Did you participate in Erin's dance? Her schedule seems very popular. There's Taekwondo classes, cycling. And also, were your children using CDC, the preschool in the basement? Right, so the poll runs for about 2 minutes. It's kind of standard. We got a minute left, but it's good to see people are responding right away. I think it's a wide distribution. It's interesting. I should add, we're going to also release these same questions in the survey format. Right, Phil, that this meeting is being recorded. If people weren't able to attend, they'll be able to watch it at their leisure. I would say this week, though, in terms of the survey, we haven't set a specific due date, but the purpose of tonight's meeting and the survey is to provide information to the building committee, who's going to be meeting next week. Or, sorry, we have 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So we have 2 weeks before the building committee meeting. All right. Okay. So let's I'll share those results so everyone can see. Can everyone see that now?
Yeah.
It's my first time using Zoom polling.
Great job.
But I think it's interesting. It's a very even distribution. I know that the community cycling program is closed. I know they were popular, but they're kind of the outlier, I would say, for now. So this is helpful, very interesting. And so this was a question about activities that you did use at the Caryl. And our next poll will be what activities are most important. In this case, I think I can launch it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, in this case, we want you to look forward. And also please just choose your top 3. So doesn't mean we're only gonna do 3 activities in the building, but just as a sense of priority, we'd like to know what your top 3 spaces are and see if your fellow attendees have similar thoughts. We need the Jeopardy music. All right. I will. Wait a few more, a little bit. We got 2/3 voting. We want every vote to count, so.
John, can you speak to this latest question in the chat, or Deborah?
Sure.
Are meeting rooms included in the event space category?
We were limited to the number of categories in our program description. We would have described meeting rooms, the smaller rooms, as separate from the large gathering space, the community space. But if meeting rooms are the most important, that actually would be the same as the craft and hobby spaces, because those are both flex spaces. Yeah, we have more categories than we could list. All right. Okay, so everyone can see the results of that. Informal social gathering was a strong support. That's interesting. And an event space, I think that was a result of the survey of neighboring towns, right? For that, a lot of those centers had an event space, and it was very useful.
There are questions why isn't none of the above important? We're going to have, as soon as this is done, an opportunity for people to tell us what activity space they would like. And if you don't see what's there, then you're going to be able to add something else during that session. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
We're also being asked how many people are linking in on this. I can't answer that other than the fact that there are about 57 people on this call.
Yeah, I think we had 80% response to the last question. I don't have that.
Can we go on to the next one?
Answer right now, but we'll publish this information too, as well as the survey, so we can go back to that. But let's go to our last question, which then is, if we've talked about activities that you want, we've had this presentation about how activities might be accommodated by different spaces. What spaces at this point do you think are most important? And again, we ask you to choose your top three, whether it's fitness related spaces, dance spaces, or the recreational spaces as we described that being more active, whether it's the large community space. Here we have the meetings and activity rooms clearly called out. Cafe lounge, those are different spaces, but similar. Is a kitchen important to you? What about space for preschool play? The game space, as Deborah's described it, is a multi-generational that would be used by seniors and tweens and teens after school. Does a sound controlled space sound interesting? Again, that could be both as a quiet space for tutoring, or it could be to keep noise inside if it's maybe a band rehearsal or music practice. And then in this case, you can certainly answer other, but as you mentioned before, Ford will have discussion in a moment, and that'll be the best time to call out specific spaces or activities that we missed. All right, we're up to 70% of our 55 attendees. And I think that's maybe everyone. Don't see any updates now. So I think I'll just publish these results so you can see that. So for space priorities, the community space, again, strong winner, strong leader, and then a lot of support for several other key spaces. That's good to see support for the kitchen. We heard about that in our interviews. That's definitely, and the cafe lounge, I think could be very interesting. There was a comment about preschool play, and yes, that cohort may be underrepresented given the time of this meeting. And that's, so if you know parents in that position, certainly encourage them to seek out and fill out the survey, which will have the same questions, plus have a chance for written feedback. And
Okay.
that's good. Right. This is very helpful.
Great. Yeah. Just as we go into the next stage, some people are concerned about, the preschool age or whatever. Chickering is having their local school committee meeting this evening, so that may be taking a lot of young parents in there. So I think that would answer that. They're continually asking questions on emergency shelter. That is an activity that we are planning on. So I think just you can bring it again on your comments and questions, but that is an activity. So the purpose of this next section is if you could take down the screen, the presentation is we have until 8:30. We would like to know what activities you think we should be considering. Those that you haven't seen up there, additional ones would be helpful to know. So that is where we are. So I'm not sure quite how to do this, but let's go. Who has a question or a
Let me
comment?
see if I can get through to Jay, and then I'll send an invite if we can all talk tomorrow morning.
Yeah, whatever. And if it's you, me, and Marco, we'll
All
chat.
right, I
but
got it. I
I
got
don't
it.
think that's the
there's
question.
Okay,
That's
fine.
Hey, can we get somebody?
Thank you, Bob. I'll call you back if I can.
Sorry, talking to myself. We could answer a couple chat questions. The building demolition is included in $13 million project costs.
Correct.
Okay, any comments about activities you'd like to say?
Board, it looks like T. Mannion wants to ask a question.
Who
Hi,
does?
yes. Hi, yes. Hi, Board. It's Tracy Mannion on Claybrook Road. One of the things I wanted to ask about again, and perhaps I think there's a meeting regarding it, is CDC. Like I've said at the town meeting, it's really the only full-time daycare we have as working parents in this town. It's a 30-year strong nonprofit that's been, supporting this community for such a long time. I can't imagine, I grew up here and came back. I can't imagine not having that school here to support my children and for them to be able to go to school with other local children. When they went to kindergarten, they had their friends already made. So if we could take a serious look at that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Just so you know, we are meeting with the people from the CDC this Friday. So.
What's their program?
Yes.
Other-
Yes, thank you.
It's preschool. They
Anyone
have
else?
just recreation stuff, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay, so I would like to make a comment on that.
Is this Nancy
CDC.
Roberts?
Lily.
Hi, Nancy.
The CDC is a private organization,
Correct.
and they did at one time have a contact with the town, which is why they got preferential treatment and a preferential space at Caryl School. They are no longer a town activity. They pay a very low fee to use the tap thing. I don't frankly think that should be a consideration in this. That if we're going to do a preschool in this town, it either needs to be a private preschool or handled through the school department. It certainly shouldn't be part of the community center.
There
Thank you,
is one
Nancy.
question.
Are there any other activities that people, let's not have a discussion on the CDC, please. That's not appropriate for this evening. Activities that you haven't seen that we're looking at, talking about? Jane McConnell?
Hi. Thank you for doing this meeting, Floyd. Many towns have senior centers, and Dover is never going to have a senior center, but this will, in effect, become a senior center. And now with the Council on Aging offices being on the second floor up a back staircase, we don't get a lot of activity. People aren't inclined to want to go there. So if you think about the future, if we build a new building, there could be a lot more activity for the Council on Aging and as a senior center because there's over 1,000 seniors in Dover who would like to be able to participate, and now we do not have a facility.
Thank you, Gene. Are there any activities that you think that we aren't doing that would be a good idea to do for seniors?
A lot of the activities that other towns do. You know, there's luncheons and there's card games. There's a lot of activities that occur.
Great, thank you. Anyone else with activities that you'd like to see us consider, both inside and outside in this facility?
I don't know how we.
Linda, do you have a question?
Well, with the fitness classes, the upstairs room is just totally unusable right now. So that I think the fitness areas should definitely be expanded. Because we have a lot of space right now that we can't use because of the heating issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but any activities that we're not doing that you'd like to have included in that?
I like the idea of a walking trail or something that we could do around the facility.
Excellent, that's a great idea, thank you. Karen Pierce. You're on mute, there you go.
Hi. Shoot.
We should have a shooting range?
No, I had paused my television and it just turned back on. So when we met with the architects about theater groups needs, one of the things that came up was a possible outdoor performance space, as well as in the biggest community space having a possible stage.
Great.
So I would love it if we could think about an outdoor performance space as well.
Thank you, Karen.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up again. That's in our mind, but it's good to hear that.
Anybody else have any, I may be missing people that are out there, so.
You can think of?
Cam Hudson, you're on mute, I think.
I guess it depends on how much the younger people would use it.
Okay, Cam Hudson.
Is there anything?
Can you hear me now? Hello?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Great. Ford, I was wondering whether it would be appropriate to have EV charging possibilities there with the expected rapid growth of electric vehicles in the near future. It would seem to me something that we need to consider for the town to act as a model for encouraging appropriate environmental activities. And with a lot of people coming there and spending time there, there'll also be people who have a need for parking and for charging their vehicles. So I'm wondering if that's a possibility as well.
Thank you. Yep. We'll add that to the list. With the school that I just did, we have those facilities. So exactly.
So this is Shashi. So
Yes.
I would like to reiterate, in addition to the outdoor stage, they did mention an indoor stage in one of the rooms. That would be nice for performances.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
We thought a small stage might be part of the community space. It would need to be flexible, so it would need to be able to fold
At least
up.
something that can accommodate a piano, a nice grand piano over there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other?
I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Eric, is this you?
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure whether or not I saw an arts and crafts area, and I know sometimes I think it would be great for both the Council on Aging and for others to have a dedicated art room where you're not worried about setting up, breaking down, that type of thing. Also, I know that sometimes it has to be lit differently and also ventilated differently. So some consideration to that, I think it would get a lot of use, I think.
Yep.
And you may want to think about that.
Yeah, we've heard that, and that's a good idea. Any others?
Word?
Barry?
Yes, I'm familiar with the facilities in Wellesley and Natick, and both of them have exercise rooms that are dedicated to exercise equipment. Is there any interest in doing something like that?
Well, we'll find out if there's interest, but I think that's a good suggestion, and it has been made already, not this evening, but with other groups. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
I would like to also just make a general comment, and I'm just a little concerned that the footprint of the building, given is just too small at the current design. Given the different large spaces and then breakout rooms for meetings and cafe and everything else, and there's a lot of, I think, people that don't want that second floor elevator access. I think that we might need to look at how to best use the footprint or expand the footprint versus going to a second story.
Just to I'm just a little bit, I want to make sure I understand. Are you talking about for a renovation of the existing building is too small?
If you were going to rip it down and make it new, it looked like 18,000 square feet or whatever I saw there was going to be way too small.
Okay, and just so I will invite you, Eric, if you have time, go out and take a look at other community centers in our area just to see their size and what they're doing. I think we're pretty much mirroring them, but that's a good comment. Anyone else? I can't see all of you, so you got to speak up. Kay? Kay Peterson, I think you...
I'm muted.
Okay. You're still muted, Kay.
Press your space.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
I want to go back to the issue of the pool, and I wonder if it's possible to, without making any commitment to having a pool, to think about the layout of the building in such a way that it wouldn't preclude a pool at some point in the future.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. And I'm not just putting you off when I say that. There are other things that I think about that maybe in the future could be there that might not be included in this one. So that's a good idea. Anyone else? We have until 8:30, or we could end it earlier.
You need to watch the presidential debate.
That's on at 9. I wouldn't miss it.
There was a chat comment about explicitly addressing COVID in our healthy buildings criteria, and I think that's something that certainly was discussed at the building committee level. We could be more explicit about that, but
I think that takes in air quality. If you go to the Dover website, you can see they on the COVID part of that website, there's the Board of Health, I believe, has issued a statement about Caryl. That's a critical element in any new building. Will have that kind of care, I guess I'm going to use the word, that will be taken into consideration. New buildings, like new school buildings, are not having the problem that old school buildings are.
right. I mean, one of the standards I think that was referenced in that report was MERV 13 filters, for example, for it, and that's basically a requirement for a LEED building, which is a specific implementation of sustainable design.
I do notice a comment about a green community. Dover is a green community, and we certainly are taking that into very strong consideration. Any other activities?
So on that basis of green consideration, I had a chat question on setting rather stronger sustainability goals than just best effort. And setting goals more like a net zero goal, or at least having some way of defining how we can get to net zero, given the clear pressure of climate change.
Thank you. On the same line as green, I saw we're shooting for a LEED's platinum designation. Those criteria are obviously being taken, will obviously be taken in our design. Any other activities? Are we missing? John Jeffries, are we missing any activities?
Go ahead.
Ford, Bob Pettit.
Bob Pettit. Excuse me,
Yeah.
John. Now you have to wait for Bob.
I just had a question. It seems like most of these activities are catered to the older people. How much consideration has been given to activities that would draw in younger people, and and maybe arts and crafts?
Yep.
So are we trying to draw to a point, but we don't want to overwhelm it?
Community center, I'm going to use ages, which some of you might laugh at, but the community center in Dover is for ages 3 to 93. So the answer is yes. Youth activities are extremely important. Park and Rec has done a good job in representing those, so absolutely.
But do we get the percentage of young people as we do the older people currently
in the building?
Yes.
I can't answer that exactly, but I would say it's pretty even.
I think you'd be surprised. This is Eric. I think you'd be surprised when the fields flood out in a certain summer. The soccer teams end up last minute booking into the gym to play, and then there's got men's leagues that will end up doing the same. It's just that I think it's based on the timing of our individual use of the building that we don't see the other groups that come in there and sneak in there and use it. So I think that you have more ages using it than you'd be surprised.
And Bob, if you recall, we did mention game rooms for both young and old, as well as the theater arts group. There's one group that is all for you. So yes, it's a fair amount of use. Let me go back to John Jeffries, who was trying to get to say something.
Thank you, Ford. And just real quickly, Ford, thank you for everyone's participation this evening. A lot of thoughtful comments, a lot of very thoughtful suggestions. Just quickly with regards to the youth and the mixture of youth, Ford, you're exactly right. And the comments pre-COVID, if you were to take into consideration the CDC, Aaron's School of Dance, the karate studio with Bev's spin classes for kids during the day, the majority of the pre-COVID visitors to the Caryl Center were kids.
I have a problem with the playground outside. Our kids have used it for years, but now it's all Loctite and all belongs to the CDC. And we've got all that space out there, which you are not allowed to go into. I have a problem with that. I don't see why they should be able to have that whole area and lock it off to everyone else, especially during times when the CDC isn't in session.
Yeah, Linda, we're talking about the future and not the past. And so that obviously will be taken into consideration. One thing that's been given to me is something that we've talked about, and it's probably good to know about. When I think of the building being used from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., potentially for a variety of uses, there's a life cycle to community centers. The life cycle may be early in the morning. You have adults before they go to work, might go in and work out and do some exercise. Then in the mid-morning to early afternoon, seniors might be predominantly the group that's in the building. After school opens up, it might be school age. Kids will be predominantly in the building. And then in the evening, again, it could be adults after the kids are in bed going over for a workout or whatever. So there's a life cycle we saw in community centers, and we are keeping that in mind. Any other activities?
Ford, Sarah Clancy and Keith Greenfield had a comment with regards to open fields, and you mentioned it earlier. So when you just were covering the life cycle of the day, I know Sarah and Keith have spent more hours, more evening hours with open fields in the building probably than any other group. So
no, we understand, and we talked to we spent time talking to open fields, and we're well aware of that. Any other activities? Really? I mean, should I call on people that'll bring them out? Anybody bashful? If not, we'll call.
It's Karen Purse. Can I say something?
I see you.
All right. So one of the things we talked about when we first started this whole process was the fact that part of the reason the current Caryl Community Center is being underutilized is because we have so many different people to go to schedule rooms and all that. So one of the things that I would be interested in, whether it's a renovated Caryl Community Center or a new build, would be to have a dedicated person in charge of the scheduling and advertising the spaces to maximize the usage and to coordinate the council on aging and the theater rehearsals and the the parks and rec. I think if we had someone whose sole job it was to pay attention, we could make sure whatever space we have was used to its maximum.
Karen, I appreciate the suggestion, and we are aware of that one also, and I know you were a part of the last year coming to our meetings. Absolutely, I think that will determine the success of the building going forward. Any other comments? If not, just so you know, we are going to be sending out the survey. Yes, maybe people are voting twice, but we already have that discussion in one election. And this one, I'm not going to be all worked up about it. So we will be sending out a survey. We are going to be using all social media outlets that we can think of, plus the newspapers. Obviously, the Dover website is critical for getting information. Dover Television is going to have this broadcast. It will have others. And I would anticipate, don't hold me to it, that we'll have between now and town meeting probably 4, maybe more, but 4 of these kinds of things. The next one would be kind of exciting because we're going to have some schematics for you to chew on a little bit. So that's where we're going. Watch for our updates. A lot of you got emails from many of us. You'll continue to get them unless you send me an email, which I've received. Take me off your list. That's okay. And when you get emails, forward them on to your friends, because the only way we're going to ever get to yes on this is to have a large amount of people involved in the process. So one last word. Anyone else have one last word that they want to say?
Thank you, Ford.
God bless you, Karen.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you all. Enjoy the debate. It should have a good time watching it. Just, relax and enjoy. Thank you very much.